As the sun set behind the crumbling stucco houses of Los Angeles, the city seemed to tighten around me like a noose. The dining room glowed orange. There was the musty scent of overcooked onions, a jumble of voices, forks clattering. My father's laugh rang above it all, loud, dismissive. Maybe he thought if he said it loud enough, it would ring out as truth for the ages. AI, gene editing, what do you think you are, Einstein? He shook his head, pouring more wine into his chipped glass. The table fell silent. Even my little sister Nina froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. People need jobs, reliable jobs, not silly dreams. My jaw tensed. It's not silly, I said, trying to steady my tone. My face flushed, rage flooding behind my eyes, but I forced myself to breathe. You read the papers. Science is changing things. I want to be part of that. Mom set down the bowl of rice with a sharp click, nervously smoothing her apron. Honey, your cousin Juan has a good job at Kaiser. He's respected, he helps people. Let's not compare, I said, voice taut. My hand trembled, so I pressed it flat on the stained wood. Dad snorted. That's because Juan isn't running after a fantasy. Maybe you should try law school, it's not too late. I pushed away my plate. I don't want law school. It's pride, Dad thundered, making the cheap chandelier rattle. You don't even listen, you don't learn from our struggles, you want to make things your way, you think you're too good for what we did. My uncle leaned in, reeking of beer and colognes. Bet money, in 2 years he's back at his old room, no job, with nothing but his genius. A ripple of laughter, my stomach churned, faces blurred by anger. I was sure none of them could see me for who I was. Only the caricature in their heads. I stood up. My chair screeched, grating on nerves already worn thin. If none of you can believe in me, fine, just watch. No one spoke. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the Los Angeles dusk, the dry air sharp with hibiscus and car exhaust. I kept walking down the cracked sidewalk, far from voices that dripped contempt. Cars hissed past. I gripped the collar of my jacket, swearing I wouldn't come crawling back. I latched onto that anger and let it carry me toward the future. The next year was cruel. I rented a tiny room in Koreatown. There was mold in the corners, streetlight cutting harsh lines across the peeling walls. Nights I'd lie awake, replaying their laughter. Maybe you should try law school. Every rejection letter from Caltech, from Salk, from every grant committee, each one strung more because I could almost hear Dad's voice in the background, smug and satisfied. But I threw myself into the work. I built a workstation out of salvaged monitors and borrowed servers from college friends. My wallet drained faster than I could refill it with temp jobs. I cleaned gyms, repaired phones, waited tables, fingers still stained with solder and glass cleaner when I returned to code at midnight. My project became my lifeline and my prison. A cloud-based neural framework designed to identify rare genetic disorders from minute, messy samplings of DNA. In the crumbling coffee houses of downtown, I'd meet with other outcasts, bright-eyed, battered PhDs, hopefuls who'd migrated from Mumbai or Ulaanbaatar, all burning to prove themselves. We shared ramen at 2 in the morning, traded stories about ungrateful bosses and skeptical parents. They laugh now, said JOT, mopping up broth with torn napkins, but they'll have to respect us eventually. I don't want their respect. Just enough funding so I can sleep, muttered Eli, dark circles flickering beneath his glasses. I nodded, though inwardly I longed for just one word of approval from my family. The more I tried to tune them out, the sharper their disappointment seemed. Day after day, I missed calls from Mom, ignored texts from Nina, convinced myself the silence was righteous, necessary. But there's something about being alone in the city, how the lights go out in offices overhead, how every success notched by someone else feels like another nail in your own coffin. My hands would shake sometimes over my keyboard. Yet I pressed on, channeling all the outrage, the shame into hours of code, data, late-night emails to potential collaborators. Most nights I heard only the hum of old fans and the distant wail of sirens. There were days when nothing worked, when a bug would crash the whole framework, data would be corrupted, or I'd wake up to emails saying my grant application had exceptional promise, but this cycle was highly competitive. On those mornings, getting out of bed felt like a joke no one else found funny. Still, I forced myself upright. I'd stare at my reflection in the green-tinged bathroom mirror, too thin, eyes ringed with exhaustion, muttering, "No one will save you, only you will do it for yourself." One morning, bruised by another sleepless night, I sent my code to an old professor for feedback. Dr. Lin was quick-witted and ruthless. She'd seen me through undergrad and I trusted her like family once. Later that afternoon she replied, "This approach works. The AI is recognizing patterns the others missed. You might have something real here. Meet me at UCLA Friday." The line between rage and hope shimmered. My hands shook, this time with excitement. Even then I remembered Dad's jeering, "Show us then. Prove it." Dr. Lin's lab was bright and humming with energy, petri dishes stacked, whiteboards crowded with equations. She waved me over, holding the printout of my model's results. "It works?" I asked, unable to hide the desperation. "Better than the commercial ones," she grinned. "With a few tweaks, this'll change diagnostics for dozens of rare diseases. How'd you come up with this?" "Necessity," I mumbled. "No one else would listen." She laughed, a warm sound filled with admiration. "You're relentless, good science demands it, ready for the next step." For weeks I worked alongside her team, refining code, validating datasets, fielding hard questions from grant committees. The old loneliness faded, replaced with shared late dinners, strangers who became comrades. Anxiety twisted inside me. I feared failure more than ever, but now my fear carried me, propelling me forward. Word spread. The first medical journal accepted our paper. Tech blogs picked up the story, spinning headlines that made my head spin. "AI cracks the untreatable." I watched the comment sections with a queasy fascination, half expecting the skepticism of my family to echo in every anonymous voice. Instead, praise, curiosity, even cautious optimism. Investors started calling, my inbox overflowed. Dr. Lin brokered meetings, rooms filled with serious men and women, their fingers steepled as they studied my slides. I wore the only suit I owned, hands still sweating. One VC asked, "And your parents, are they in biotech too?" I shook my head, the anger was gone now, in its place was a cold reserve. "No. They thought this was impossible." He laughed as if that made the story better. I didn't mention the dinner table, or the slamming of doors, or the hollow ache of being called a fool by people you loved. We licensed the tech to a diagnostics company. Suddenly there were real numbers, contracts, equity, grants. I sat in my shoebox apartment, fresh wire transfers pinging on my phone, and didn't cry. There was no vindication yet. Only exhaustion. It was 2 years before I saw my family again. At first I tried to keep my distance easy since no one reached out, but Nina called late one night, her voice uncertain and small. "Mom's birthday's this weekend. She keeps hoping you'll come. Dad, he's been different since the news stories." A pause. "They miss you, I miss you." For a moment the old wounds ached, but the anger had shifted. It had grown cold and clear, like sea glass worn smooth. I was no longer fighting to be believed, I was fighting now to forgive. The drive to the old house pulsed with memories, the familiar mess of Beverly Boulevard, the graffiti, the faded markets. When I parked, my hands didn't shake, though my heart raced. I carried a laptop bag slung over my shoulder, just a tool now, not a shield. The house was loud again for Mom's birthday. Relatives filled every corner, gossiping over red plastic cups, filling the stale air with jokes and sung Spanish verses. My stomach tightened as I crossed the threshold. Familiar faces, pretending not to watch as I entered, all turning a fraction of a second too slow. I set my gift on the kitchen table, a neatly boxed tablet for Mom. We hugged, awkward, long. I felt her pulse racing as she clung to me, and then she let go with a breathless, "Ah, Mijo, you look so thin." Dad emerged from the living room. He was older than I remembered, lines harder, hair thinner. For a second, uncertainty flickered across his face. I braced myself for some rehearsed cruelty. Instead, he pressed my shoulder, almost gentle. "Welcome home," was all he said. Later, after the birthday candles had been blown out and the kitchen was sticky with cake and spilled beer, my uncle cornered me. The same uncle who'd once said I'd return with nothing. He was drunk, but not cruel now, just curious. "So you really did it, huh?" he said. "Saw your name on the news, the DNA thing." I nodded, wishing I could say it mattered more than it did. He grinned, teeth stained with frosting. "Damn. Show us how it works, genius." I hesitated, but Nina caught my arm. "Show them," she whispered. "Just show them." Most of the family gathered in the den, half bored, half incredulous. Dad sat in his old recliner, eyes hard and skeptical as always. I opened my laptop, hands steady, launched the interface I'd built in solitude, in desperation, and now in triumph. Pulled up a sample DNA file, anonymized, safe. The AI word through lines of code, the only sound in the tense room. The result appeared: diagnosis, probability, recommended action. I explained quietly how a doctor in the Midwest had once used this same tool to find a rare disorder in a toddler, saving his life. The uncle who mocked me let out a low whistle. "Is that real?" said my father, voice hoarse. "It's real," I replied. My restraint was steel-hard, but my lungs felt raw. "Hospitals use it. Kids are living because of it." The room was silent. I watched their faces, doubt or confusion. I realized some part of me needed this scene, the proof, the concrete win, more than any contract or magazine spread. Nina stood beside me beaming with pride. Mom wiped her eyes. Dad didn't move at first. Then slowly he stood and crossed the room. He studied the screen, the scrolling lines of code. He looked at me, a long, searching look that carried years of stubborn pride, confusion, and at last a glimmer of something like respect. "Forgive me, son," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know, I didn't see." He gripped my shoulder, his hand trembling. For the first time I could remember, he pulled me into an embrace, not stiff or obligatory, but real. My anger cracked, flooding out with the old hurt. I hugged him back, remembering the rage and the nights alone, but feeling something new now, a strange, gentle peace. I looked around at my family, their faces softened, skepticism melting into wonder. For the rest of the evening we laughed, we argued over old memories, we joked about who'd get rich next. My aunt insisted I meet her friend's son, an engineer who also likes robots. For once, I didn't wince at the misunderstanding. Later, when the house grew quiet and stars blinked above the battered skyline, Dad sat next to me on the porch. "You really changed things," he said, not looking at me. "No more than you did. You built this family from nothing." He shook his head, a sad smile hovering. "We should have believed you. I was afraid, maybe jealous. You're different. I see that now." We sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the city. The rage that had carried me for years was gone. In its place, something quieter, acceptance, maybe even forgiveness. I returned home that night, my real home, built from struggle and rage, but also from hope. I knew I'd always carry that old wound inside, the memory of laughter at a crowded dinner table. But now I could carry it lightly, as proof not just of what I had built, but of what I had overcome. Under the lights of Los Angeles, the city no longer closed in. It opened instead, filled with possibility, alive to every returning step.